Chicago, 1994. Before Meghan Markle was a household name, before the world knew her as royalty or a Hollywood actress, there was a story buried so deep that it was almost erased from history. This wasn't a story about Hollywood fame, royal titles, or cameras flashing. This was about a quiet chapter in her life, a time when the only witnesses to the drama were the people closest to her. It was a story about Joe Guiliano, Meghan's first husband, and the family that would come to reject her. At the time, Joe was just a regular guy, living a life grounded in tradition, family, and loyalty. He wasn't chasing fame or fortune, he was looking for something simple. But when he met Meghan, everything changed. Their relationship grew quickly, like a fire that burns bright and hot, but just as fast as it sparked, it was extinguished. There are no photos, no public records. It's as if their marriage never even happened. For nearly 30 years, people close to the truth remained silent, bound by an unspoken rule from the Guiliano family. This story was not to be told. But as time has passed, whispers have begun to surface, revealing a secret chapter in Meghan's life that she never expected to come back to the surface. It was long before the royal titles, long before Netflix deals or media storms. In Las Vegas, beneath dim lights and with no witnesses to hold them to their vows, Meghan and Joe exchanged promises. No photographers, no crowds, no dazzling dresses, just two young people alone in a chapel. But while Joe thought they were starting their life together, Meghan seemed to see it as just another chapter in her journey, one she would quickly leave behind. Why did a seemingly harmless marriage need to be erased so completely? Why was silence more important than the truth? To understand that, we need to step inside the world Meghan entered, the Guiliano family's world. This wasn't a family of fame or luxury. They were a deeply traditional, private Italian-American household. Their values were old-fashioned, their gatherings centered around home-cooked meals, and problems were dealt with quietly behind closed doors. They were a family who believed in loyalty and commitment, and marriage was sacred, a lifelong bond, not something to be taken lightly. But Meghan wasn't like them. She was a whirlwind of ambition, dreams, and desires that went beyond Chicago. She talked about acting, modeling, traveling, being seen. At first, they thought it was youthful excitement, something every young person dreams of. But soon, they realized it was something more. Meghan's ambitions didn't fit in with the life the Guilianos were living. She was someone who wanted more, someone who would leave it all behind. As Meghan grew closer to Joe, the family started noticing small things, inconsistencies, tiny details that didn't add up, a graduation year that didn't match up, stories that shifted depending on who was listening. Nothing major, but enough to raise an eyebrow. Joe's parents weren't suspicious people by nature, but something about Meghan didn't sit right with them. She would talk about auditions, her next big move, but when they asked her about her past, she would steer the conversation back to her dreams of fame and fortune. It was as if the Meghan they knew was hiding another version of herself, a version that was calculating, always thinking about her next step. Joe's mother was uncomfortable with what she saw. She trusted her instincts and they told her that something was off. She asked questions, but Meghan always found a way to avoid them, pushing the conversation back to her future, her career. Slowly, the Guilianos realized Meghan wasn't stepping into their family, she was just passing through it. The more Meghan chased her dreams, the more the cracks in their marriage began to show. There was no shouting, no huge dramatic moments. It was the slow kind of distance, the kind that builds up over time, like an empty chair at the dinner table or an unanswered phone call from a mother-in-law. Meghan spent more time in Los Angeles than she did in Chicago. She skipped family gatherings, avoided the traditions that were so important to Joe and his family. She wanted a life of fame and glamour, but Joe's family, with their values of stability and privacy, couldn't understand her need to be constantly in the spotlight. Joe's father, a man of few words, would gently remind Meghan that marriage wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about building a life together, rooted in family and tradition. But Meghan didn't see marriage that way. She didn't think it should slow her down. She believed marriage should fit into the life she envisioned, a life filled with cameras, scripts, and a future far beyond the quiet life the Guilianos had in mind. Inside the house, two worlds collided, Joe with his vision of a stable family life, and Meghan, who couldn't shake the need to reinvent herself. By the time anyone realized just how much things had changed, the warmth and closeness that once held the family together had faded. Their marriage was no longer built on love and partnership, it had become a fragile facade, crumbling under the weight of Meghan's ambitions. Then, in the midst of the tension, came a revelation no one expected. Meghan reportedly was pregnant. In most families, this would be cause for celebration, but not in the Guiliano household. The news didn't bring joy, it brought fear. Not because they didn't want a child, but because they didn't know what kind of future this child would have. The Guilianos were a family who believed in raising children with stability, privacy, and love, not with fame and scandal. With the marriage already strained, the the pregnancy forced a decision. The family decided they would raise the child, but Meghan, seemingly without any emotional reaction, accepted the decision. She wasn't angry. She didn't argue. It was almost as if she was relieved to step away from a path she never truly wanted. And as this decision settled, the cracks in the marriage deepened. What started as a love story was now at the brink of something much more complex and much more secretive. As the pregnancy continued, the Guilianos kept the baby close, raising her as their own, while Meghan's life moved on without looking back. By mid-1995, a baby girl was born, a child whose birth would never make it to public records. She was quietly introduced at family gatherings as a relative's child, never fully explained and never questioned again. It was as if the Guilianos had built a protective wall around her, shielding her from the public eye, from questions, and from the story that Meghan had left behind. Joe, ever the devoted son, stayed involved in his daughter's life, but Meghan, she was long gone. She left for college, for auditions, for everything that pulled her away from the quiet life the Guilianos had offered her. She didn't just leave Joe, she left motherhood. And with that, she walked away from a chapter that the Guilianos would carry with them in silence. One friend of the family later said it wasn't about Meghan leaving Joe. No, it was about Meghan leaving motherhood altogether. The separation wasn't loud or messy. It wasn't filled with dramatic courtroom battles or bitter arguments. Instead, it ended quietly, with an annulment filed and sealed faster than anyone expected. Both sides agreed to keep silent. Meghan would walk away with a clean slate, her name erased from the Guiliano family history. The child would remain hidden in the shadows, away from the spotlight that Meghan had come to crave. The truth was buried, sealed by agreements, silences, and perhaps money, but no one would speak of it again. And so, the marriage disappeared. A whole chapter of Meghan's life vanished as if it had never been written. The child, once born into a family that had welcomed her with open arms, was erased from public view. The Guilianos kept their privacy, their quiet lives intact, raising a child who would never be acknowledged in public records. As for Meghan, she moved on, she reinvented herself, stepping into a new identity, one that no longer had a trace of the past she left behind. Not long after the annulment, everything about the Guilianos' home changed. Neighbors remember how the porch light stopped coming on, how the curtains were drawn tight, and how the phone line was suddenly disconnected. A moving truck arrived one morning, and by evening, the house was empty. The family had disappeared without a trace. No forwarding address, no explanations. Some say they moved overseas to protect the child from ever being connected back to Meghan. Others say it was a silent escape, a way of disappearing so the truth would never rise again. For nearly 3 decades, the Guilianos lived in the shadows. Joe never spoke publicly about Meghan, even as she became one of the most famous women in the world. The child raised in their care never emerged, remaining a secret no one dared to expose. But silence, as it often does, has a way of loosening its grip over time. The whispers started quietly, not in tabloids, not from strangers, but from those who knew the Guiliano family personally. One voice, simple and quiet, finally spoke the truth. We didn't hide her secret to protect a lie. We hid it to protect a child. And just like that, the door that had been locked for so many years creaked open. The story, long buried, began to rise again. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. It was Meghan's secret, a chapter she thought she could erase forever. Now, the daughter, grown up and reportedly asking questions, stands at the center of this hidden history. And the people who knew her first, the people who knew the truth, wonder how long they can stay silent. Was it the right decision to keep everything buried? Was it fair to hide a child's existence for so long? And who will speak out now? Meghan Markle, the Duchess, has become a global figure, a woman constantly in the spotlight. But behind the glittering titles and the media attention lies a shadow, a forgotten marriage, a hidden family, a child whose very existence was erased from history. What kind of family disappears to protect a secret like that? What kind of man stays silent for 30 years while the woman he once loved becomes a household name? What truth is powerful enough to make a whole family vanish? The answers remain shrouded in secrecy, lurking in the spaces where the Guilianos once lived. Behind sealed documents, closed curtains, and quiet whispers, a story waits. A story that will not stay buried forever. Maybe one day the daughter will step forward, revealing what was hidden for so long. Maybe Joe will finally speak. Maybe Meghan will be forced to face the past she left behind. Or maybe, just maybe, the truth will remain locked away, like a forgotten chapter in a book that refuses to stay closed. But one thing is certain, silence is not the same as forgetting. It lingers like footsteps echoing down a hallway, always just out of reach, but never fully gone. And as Meghan moves forward with new titles, new countries, and new reinventions, the people who knew her first still carry the weight of the story she left behind. The story of a vanished family, a lost marriage, and a secret that refuses to stay buried. Because, as every truth knows, no matter how deeply it is hidden, it always finds a way back into the light. Finds a way back into the light. Finds a way back into the light.